Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Jazakallah khair for joining us, brothers and sisters. Inshallah, this evening we have a live Zoom session with a number of guest speakers to look at the current situation in Palestine. Hopefully, inshallah, with our guest speakers, we'll be able to discuss and understand how we can support the people of Palestine. Alhamdulillah, really pleased that we have a number of guest speakers here with us this evening, inshallah, including Ismail Patel, who's the founder of the Friends of Al Aqsa, Sister Abeer Zayyad, who is an archaeologist and a historical expert on the Masjid Al Aqsa. Unfortunately, Sheikh Umar Al-Kiswani may not be able to join us this evening simply due to the current situation there. We've not been able to reach him this evening, but if he does connect, hopefully, inshallah, we'll get to speak with him as well. We also have Brother Hussam, who is the Palestinian ambassador. And later in the evening, inshallah, we will have Sister Nasha, who is the MP for Bradford West, and Jeremy Corbyn, who is the MP for Islington North and the former Labour Party leader. Inshallah, we're going to start the session with some recitation from Sheikh Sajid.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم سبحان الذي أسرى بعبده ليلا من المسجد الحرام إلى المسجد الأقصى الذي باركنا حوله لنريه من آياتنا إنه هو السميع البصير صدق الله العظيم. Glory be to He who sent His servant during the night from Masjid al-Haram to Masjid Al-Aqsa, whose surroundings we have blessed, and we have shown him our signs. Indeed, he is all hearing, all seeing.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh Sajid. Going to pass over first to Ismail Bhai from the Friends of Al Aqsa. Ismail Bhai, Jazakallah khair for joining us this evening and all the efforts, mashallah, that you're making. There's obviously a great deal of fear and anxiety in the communities currently. We've seen so much footage which is concerning in the blessed month of Ramadan, and it seems like it's something which is a reoccurring occurrence, and it's created a lot of fear and anxiety amongst the communities here in Bradford and across the country and across the world. Be great if you could help set the scene for us in terms of what the current situation is there, and the work that the Friends of Al Aqsa are doing, inshallah.
Jazakallah khairan, Brother Shadim, for inviting me on a very important topic and at a very important time as well. So yeah, I'm glad to have been invited, and inshallah in the few minutes that I've got, I'll try and provide a sort of background to where we are. You have got some very wonderful speakers with you, as you mentioned, Sister Abeer, Hussam, the ambassador for Palestine, Nasha and Jeremy Corbyn, hopefully who will update you on the more current situation, because I'm sure they're more up to date with that. I want to give you a background of the crisis that we face at the moment and how it came about, and hopefully end with the issue of Friends of Al Aqsa, if that's okay. Okay, to begin, sometimes we forget, and in particular the Western media would like us to think that every time Palestinians are targeted and the crisis emerges, it's something new, and they want to start that on that particular day. And particularly the reference point would be when the Palestinians retaliated. So it would be, look, Hamas is throwing the rockets, therefore we have to do something. Or look, the Palestinians are demonstrating, therefore Israel is reacting. Or look, the Palestinians are throwing stones, so we have to react. So the Western narrative is always counter-Palestinians, is always pro-Israeli. And this is something very important for us to overcome and understand, that the crisis is not because what the Palestinians are doing, but because of the presence of the Israelis there in the first place. That brings a very important questions to us, is how did the Israelis end up in Palestine? And of course, our history is very long and we haven't got that much time, but we can break down the Palestinian crisis in 3 phases. And I'm going to start from the first phase and move towards the final phase, bringing into the contemporary time. The very first phase is the time of the fall of the Ottoman Caliphate and the emergence of the Sykes-Picot Agreement and later on the Balfour Declaration. On one side, we have the Ottoman Caliphate, which controlled the region of Palestine, and the British won that area in World War I, post-World War I, and overtook the area of Al-Sham, and Palestine was occupied by the British. The British subsequently, or even before that, passed the Balfour Declaration, in which they tried to establish a Jewish homeland for a Jewish people on Palestinian land. Now, what is very interesting in the first phase, that the first phase is a political phase, where only the elites in Europe, in particularly, in fact, just Britain, and the Zionist movement got together to try and establish a Jewish homeland in Palestine. The majority of the Jewish people were against this idea. So if you look from the time Balfour Declaration was signed to up until the mid-1930s, nothing substantial demographically takes place. The Jewish population would not leave Europe. They did not want to go to Palestine to create a homeland. So this was a political vision. It was a colonialist enterprise. That was, if you remember, if we can cast our mind back to 100-year history, that at this time, Britain was a superpower. It had a great Raj, a great British Empire extending to the Indian Raj and a lot of colonies around the world. And it could do what it liked. It ruled the waves. And in this phase, they wanted to expand and put people so that their empire could be supported and expanded and stabilized. And hence, that's why the Zionist movement comes in here, that they were prepared to bid for the British and be the bulwark for the British as an imperial power and be their servants, literally. And if you look at Theodor Herzl's work, you will find very clearly him stating, Theodor Herzl, who's the leader of the Zionist movement, that we will create a frontier for the British in Palestine so that it can carry on with its empire. But as I say, in this first phase, this political phase, the Jewish people in Europe would not move. They would not go to this so-called Jewish homeland. And the demography shows that, in fact, up until 1933, less than, I think, 7% of the population of Palestine was Jewish. The rest was Palestinian. So you have a major event then takes place in the second phase. The second phase starts with the coming to the rise of power in Germany of Hitler and his persecution of the Jewish people and the coming of the Holocaust. That then led to the massive movement of the Jewish people out of Palestine, out of Europe and into Palestine. So this second phase, which starts sort of in the middle of 1930, after Hitler comes into power, we have some very interesting estimates. So if we look at the first phase, when there's 75% of the population is Palestinian, 90% of the population is Palestinian, and we have a very small Jewish population. By 1933, that's almost 20 years of the Balfour Declaration, we have only got 18% of Jewish population. We still have 82% population, Palestinian population. Thereafter, we have a massive change. And from 1935, the number of Jews coming into Europe, coming to Palestine increases. And of course, with the end of the Second World War, with the total collapse of Germany and the Middle East, we have a massive exodus of the Jewish population out of Europe into Palestine. And then immediately thereafter, you have the war, the 1947-48 war, the war in which the British government assists Israel, arms it, and undermines the Palestinian people. In that war, then you have a mass expulsion of the Palestinians from their area, from the 1947-48 area, where 75% of the Palestinians are made refugees, and they are refugees even today. And this is very, very important, and I'll come back to this point later on. And this creates a mass exodus of Palestinians now from inside Palestine and the establishment of the Jewish state. Now, the Jewish state itself becomes established because, for several reasons. One, there's a mass expulsion of the Palestinians. Second, the international community and the United Nations, and particularly America and Britain, enforce upon the United Nations to accept Israel as a state. And in 1947, when the United Nations accepts Israel as a state, something incredible happens is they accept Israel as a state on the condition that it abides by UN Resolution 194. Now, this resolution demands that Israel must allow all the refugees, all the people who were expelled back to their natural homes. So within what was being created Israel. Unfortunately, Israel has never abided by this resolution, and this resolution has been enacted over 100 times. Despite that, the Palestinians have never been allowed back to their natural homes. And this second phase is a very important phase, because this is when now we have the demographic change. Initially, if you remember, I told you it was a political phase, when the political leaders of Europe, Britain in particularly, Europe, America, and the Zionist movement were trying to establish something. The second phase sees the establishment and the demographic change, where the population, the Jewish population, is brought in from Europe into Palestine. And this was almost, it wasn't voluntarily, it was guided, it was manipulated, and it was used at the back of the Holocaust. So we have then the establishment of the state of Israel. On the other side, we have the Nakba, which is the catastrophe of the Palestinian people who are expelled. That brings us to the third phase. So the third phase starts immediately after the establishment of the state of Israel. And the third phase is a phase that slowly and surely expels Palestinians. First and foremost, I think, it stops the Palestinians who are made refugees, the 75% population of Palestine, to come back to their natural homes, but also those who are left behind. They were slowly being evicted from their homes, their property being expropriated, and Israel was enriching itself from the Palestinian land and property and assets, and at the same time stopping the Palestinians coming in. On the other hand, what they were doing is they sent out an international invitation to Jews around the world, wherever they were born, whether it was in Russia, in Britain, in, so we say, South America, or in Southern Africa, wherever they were, to come to the newly formed state upon the land of Palestinians, the state of Israel, and they would be given automatic citizenship of Israel, whereas the indigenous Palestinians who had been living there for thousands of years were not allowed to come back. So this double move by Israel then changes the population from a majority of Jewish population to a minority of the Palestinians. In 1947-48, Israel occupies, I think, 68% of Mandate Palestine, if I'm not mistaken, at the top of my head. And Israel, of course, is establishing here, and it uses those laws, as I mentioned in the second phase. Now we're entering into the third phase to consolidate its position. This carries on up until 1967. And in 1967, another war takes place in which the rest of Palestine is occupied, and also the rest of Jerusalem. In the 47-48 war, only half of Jerusalem is occupied. The western half was occupied. In 1967, the eastern part of Jerusalem is occupied. And within the eastern part of Jerusalem is Masjid Al Aqsa. And all the neighborhoods that we are now very familiar with today, of the area of, in particularly concerned Sheikh Jarrah. And this ties us back very well to the earlier part I mentioned to you, that in 1947-48, Palestinians were expelled from their homelands and made refugees. So what they did is they moved towards what we now know as Gaza, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and of course, what is the West Bank and Eastern Jerusalem, and they started residing there. And some of the people from 47, 48 area, quite a large number of families, were housed in Sheikh Jarrah area. And they were housed and given legal document by the United Nations, and at the time Jordanian authorities were controlling the eastern part of East Jerusalem, to say they could live there and this is their homes. And this is very important on international law and legal terms. What is also very important about Sheikh Jarrah is the area of Sheikh Jarrah is historically immensely significant for us, because the word itself, Sheikh Jarrah, comes from Jarrah. Hussam din al-Jarrah. Now, Hussam din al-Jarrah was a physician. He was the doctor for Salahuddin Ayyubi. Salahuddin Ayyubi's doctor, called Hussam din Jarrah, used to live and establish Sheikh Jarrah. So the heritage and the history of Sheikh Jarrah goes back to the 12th century, well before any Zionist aspiration came about or the movement was established, well before British had an empire, well before any idea of a Jewish state. So the Palestinians' descendancy to Sheikh Jarrah can be traced to the 12th century. And Sheikh Jarrah is very close to Masjid Al Aqsa, as I'm sure Sister Abeer will elaborate on that. So we have here the neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah that is traced back to the 12th century. And we have a people of Sheikh Jarrah who are made refugees in 1947-48, who are now facing a second onslaught of being forcefully expelled from their houses. As I said, I'll leave that for the other speakers who we have got today. So these are the three phases that I wanted to touch on. So just to recap for you, the very first earlier phase in which the political elites of the West and the Zionist movement try and establish a Jewish state on the land of Palestine, but the Jewish people would not support them. The second phase is the coming to the power of Hitler and the Holocaust, when the Jewish people were forced out of Europe because of anti-Semitism. And something I can add here is that the Europeans and the Americans during that period did not want to house the Jewish refugees from Europe. So they had to be moved. They were forcefully moved to Palestine. And this is a second phase where we have then see a change of the population, or balancing out of the population of increasing Jewish population in the Palestinians. And when this war takes place, the 1947-48 war, the Palestinians are expelled, Jewish state is established, and the majority of Jewish population comes into being. And the Palestinians suffer the Nakba, and they become refugees in their own homeland. And then in 1967, we have the war when Israel then extends its borders and occupies the rest of Mandate Palestine, Gaza, the West Bank, Masjid Al Aqsa, and so forth. And in there is the area of Sheikh Jarrah that is extremely significant for us today, and its heritage and history goes back to Salahuddin Ayyubi rahmatullahi, and being named after his physician, Hussam din al-Jarrah. So this is the background to the situation we found in. So let me end where I began, to say that the problem begins because Israel occupied Palestine. And it is very simple for us to understand this. And this simplicity is what we have to tell our friends, our colleagues, those who do not know about the Palestinian issue. And we should give them a simple example. Imagine one individual comes and occupies your house and then throws you out of that house. And if you retaliate, that individual then turns to the world and says, look, this person is retaliating, therefore I'm going to hit him, or I'm going to punish that person. How would that person feel who's been left out, thrown out of their house? They would not accept it. So the issue is very simple. It is an occupier that has taken and dispossessed Palestinians of their land, their homes, their property, their dignity, their human rights, and their right of worship. And we therefore must rise up and defend the oppressed. And it is our responsibility. Of course, I'm not touching here of the whole other angle here, which I hope Sister Abeer takes on board, of the Islamic significance. I've just touched on the historical, the moral, and the ethical right of the Palestinians. But for Muslims, there's an added dimension of our faith that brings us to Masjid Al Aqsa and its significance. and how important that is. I hope the other speakers will expand on what I've introduced in this session, and I hope that together we will unite. And just to end, you asked me, Brother Usam, to talk about, sorry, Brother Shadim, on the work of Friends of Al Aqsa. In this time of crisis on Palestine, on the Palestinians, please visit our website, foa.org.uk. There are many events that are taking place. We are holding rallies and demonstrations. This Saturday, there is a national demonstration in London where we're hoping we will get over 10,000 people demonstrating. Please try and come if you can. Send a message to people living around London or near London. Make sure they join us this Saturday, starting at midday in London. Second thing we're doing is we have a letter writing campaign to MPs where we're demanding they condemn the Israeli actions and they call upon the British government to call upon sanctions on Israel. I think it is time we should demand what is right. We have already got over 90,000 people in Britain have written a letter to their MPs. If you haven't done that, please join in that campaign and make sure that we do that. I know MPs have been in touch with that. Each MP is receiving over 1,000 letters, and that is making a big change. For the first time since I've started the campaign over 25 years ago, we have now MPs writing to us with their statements condemning Israel. And I think we are seeing a sea change, and this is taking place because individuals like you, one person at a time, is doing something about it. Thirdly, I would like you to, because our media is not telling us exactly what is happening on the ground, use your social network and your social media to send the messages out. Pass the messages out to see what's happening on Palestine in the ground. Follow us on our social media, Friends of Al Aqsa, social media, or myself, and hopefully you will get lots of information which you can pass on and then inform other people of what is happening on the ground. Because if we try to rely and depend on our national media and what we call the mainstream British media, then the people will be fooled. And unfortunately, as Malcolm X has said, you will end up believing that the oppressor is the bad person, the oppressor is the good person, and that the oppressed is the bad person. That's what's happening. So we have to change those dynamics. On the front of that, or rather on the back of that, is we need to campaign, and particularly against the BBC. Make sure the BBC starts reporting appropriately, uses the right language, email them and complain to Ofcom. That is something very, very important. We have to change the narrative, and these small steps will bring about, hopefully, a force that will bring about a change and liberation of the Palestinian people and an end to the occupation. We have to also remember, as Muslims, which majority of Islam people are here listening today, if we have got a few hours left of Ramadan, dua is very important. And at the back of that, get in touch with your local imams that this Eid khutbah must be on the virtues of Masjid Al Aqsa. We have written to most of the mosques in Britain, but if those who haven't received our email or text messages, please let your local imam know to focus on virtues of Masjid Al Aqsa. We have got a whole template on our website with a lot of information if the imams need help of how to deliver those khutbahs. That way we will inform the congregation of the virtues of Masjid Al Aqsa. These are some of the stuffs that we getting through Brother Shadim of how to increase the awareness of Palestine and the Palestinians and the virtues of Masjid Al Aqsa so that we can bring about a change. Jazakallah Khan for inviting me, and I hope we've made a reasonable contribution for the others to pick up on.
Jazakallah khair, Ismail Bhai. Really important reminder, and alhamdulillah, we're really blessed that Friends of Al Aqsa is doing some amazing work, and we're able to support that. Just before we go over to Sister Abeer, just wanted to highlight the current context of the situation. There's some statistics here that have been shared by the medical aid for Palestinians, and this is as of yesterday, 9 p.m., 1,250 Palestinians injured in the West Bank, included occupied East Jerusalem since the 7th of May. 30 Palestinians killed, included 10 children, one with a disability, and 203 injured in Gaza. More than 140 sites in Gaza targeted by Israeli strikes, including the complete destruction of the 12-story residential Hanadi Tower, 100 meters from Mapper's office in Gaza City. 3 Israelis killed and dozens injured in more than 250 rockets fired from Gaza. So this gives you some context of the severity of the situation over there. And as Ismail Bhai said, unfortunately, our media is not giving a fair representation of the story. But we're really pleased that Sister Abeer is able to join us this evening. It would be really good to hear from yourself as to what the current challenges are on the ground. And mashallah, if you tell us a little bit about the work that yourself and your colleagues are doing as well. Jazakallah khair.
The current situation in Jerusalem, it's still attention is not as hard as it was in the last few days, but it's still very attention till Fajr time. There was a lot of arresting for youth and beating, shooting in many different areas in Jerusalem. The situation, especially for Al Aqsa Mosque, is very dangerous. Today, they closed the gate for little time inside the mosque. They did not allow for us to enter, and after that, they reopened the mosque again. Of course, all what happened in the last few days, it starts from the beginning of Ramadan, but it's a continuous issue, which is that the Zionists want to control Al Aqsa Mosque and want to demolish Al Aqsa Mosque and to build instead a temple in the place of Al Aqsa Mosque. This is the goal for them, and they are working hard for that with media, with going to speaking with a lot of media in the whole world, like if we are taking their own holy place, and that if we are the one that does not allow for them to have freedom of religion. So they are using media in a very, very strong way to put a narrative which is completely different than the fact. There is nothing from archaeological point of view say that there was a temple in the place of Al Aqsa Mosque. In Roman time, we have a building that was built by a Palestinian person. His name is Herod, and this person, he was become a Jew by force, but he's a Palestinian nationality. And the building that he built, it served only 70 years, and it was destroyed. And in these 70 years is the years that Zakaria alayhi salam and Yahya alayhi salam, Isa alayhi salam was in Al Aqsa Mosque, Maryam alayhi salam, all of these important people was in Al Aqsa Mosque in that time. And after that, this place was destroyed till the Palestinian when they become Muslim, it was rebuilt again since almost 1,400 years. So 70 years built by a Palestinian person, it does not give you a right to come now and to kick us out from our place, from our holy place as a Palestinian. And as a Muslim, this place is very important for us. It's part from our aqidah, and it's connected with each Muslim. And if any Muslim think that he's not connected with the mosque, he needs to reading the Quran and understand the religion very well. Al Aqsa Mosque is connecting with each prayer that you are praying, because the prayer is connected with the Isra wal Mi'raj, and the Isra wal Mi'raj is connected with Al Aqsa Mosque. So Al Aqsa Mosque is our aqidah. And what Israel are doing and Zionists are doing, they are touching our aqidah. They are fighting us in our aqidah and want to take the mosque from us and to demolish Al Aqsa Mosque. This is why all these problems start. The Zionists all the time was putting in the media that they are controlling, that they are taking, that they come, we will build it soon. They put even the maps, how they will build it. They put how to, when they will destroy it. everything they are planning for it. And when our guys see all of this and see how they are entering to the mosque and see how Israel police is dealing and not allowed for us as a Muslim to enter, and go to the media and say that, like, if we are the one that does not give them the freedom of religion, and it's completely opposite side. Even El Burak wall, which is by national law, it's a Palestinian and belong for us as a Muslim, they take it since 1967, and it's not allowed for us as a Palestinian to go to that area inside the old city, which completely belong to us, and we own it. So this situation and this kind of thought, and also the apartheid system that is becoming more and more and more clear, this is take us to the point that we are in. Palestinian people understand that if they silence on entering an Aqsa mosque in the 28th of Ramadan, in the day that Israel called it Jerusalem Day, and celebrate that they are occupying us inside our mosque, it will be like if we selling the mosque. So it was a willing from everybody to protect the mosque, and this is what they done. And alhamdulillah, we was succeed as a Jerusalem people not to allow for the Zionists to enter inside Al Aqsa mosque in that day. Of course, this is when you touch the Aqidah, is not only Jerusalem people are touched. So it started in all over Palestine, historical Palestine, and for the first time, we are seeing that the land of that was occupied in 1948, and you know, in 1948, they occupied the majority of Palestine, and they kicked out the Palestinian who are living there. It stay few of us inside our land that was occupied in 1948, and with time they increased their number. And now when they see even that they have Israel passport, and some of them even go to Israel military, when it's become touch the Aqsa Mosque directly, and they start to understand what is happening, we see that in all these cities, in Akka, in Yafa, in Nazareth, in Lud, all the city start protesting for Al Aqsa Mosque. And one of the settler in Lud city, he shoot a Palestinian there without any reason, and he was killed. And now even they attacked his house after this, instead of arresting that settler who shoot a civilian person in the street without any reason. So all of this is caused a big movement that we see it for the first time inside the whole Palestine. And this is amazing, because it just tell Israel and tell the whole world that we are caring about our place, we are caring about Al Aqsa Mosque. So this is will make, I think, this is will make the Israeli think twice about touching the mosque again, or do anything against the mosque. And we hope that Muslims all over the world understand how much is important they're standing for Al Aqsa Mosque. They're saying, they're speaking, they're going in marshals, sending messages, speaking in social media, sending messages to different kind of media, like you mentioned, BBC. All of these, each second from this is important. Each action from this is important, and it's in fact directly on the situation of Al Aqsa Mosque and Jerusalem. Sheikh Jarrah, other issues inside Jerusalem, all of it is connected with each other, and the main goal is Al Aqsa Mosque. Why they want to take Sheikh Jarrah? Sheikh Jarrah is the heart of Jerusalem, is in the middle of East Jerusalem, and also it's very close to Al Aqsa Mosque. It's less than 1 kilometer from the old city. So mainly they want to control the whole area around the old city and the old city. So in this way, they will be able to take the mosque very easy. This is the main goal. So you need to understand that each house are taking inside Jerusalem. At the end, the main goal for it is Al Aqsa Mosque. And Al Aqsa Mosque is not only for Jerusalem people, and it's not supposed to be the responsibility only for Jerusalem people to protect. Yes, Jerusalem people would do everything to protect the mosque. They are willing to give their life. If you see some of the guys who lost their eyes during this clashes, when they was asked about what they're feeling about losing their eyes, their answer was Fid al Aqsa. So the most important for them, it was Al Aqsa, not their eyes. So this is just tell you how much is important. So it's responsibility for each Muslim all over the world.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair, Sister Abeer. It's mashallah, really great to hear from you and the passion that the brothers and sisters have there to protect Masjid Al Aqsa. And it's also encouraging to hear from you the benefit that there is when we are actively participating, because many people have a concern about, what's the benefit of going out on marches and doing such things. So alhamdulillah, this is really reassuring. Inshallah, I'm going to pass over to the next speaker now. Jazakallah khair, Sister Abeer. Brother Hussam Zobenlat is the Palestinian ambassador.
Okay, brothers, honorable friends, ladies and gentlemen. On the one hand, I really have a lot to say today. I could go on for hours and days. On the other, everything I have to say can really be summed up in one word. Enough. Enough already. Enough with the both sides and clashes, and we must show restraint and all this empty talk. Enough of dancing around the truth. Really enough with all this crap, I must say. There is only one side here. That side is Israel, an oppressor, an aggressor, a colonial expansionist state built around ethno-religious supremacism that has an army, an air force, a navy that has nuclear weapons and which continues to enjoy the apparently unending support of the world's superpowers. And there is the Palestinian people. There is us, an indigenous native population, oppressed, dispossessed, scattered across the world, scattered across their homeland, where they suffer daily the indignities that come with being discriminated against, in law and in fact, detained, evicted, wounded, and killed with no recourse to any justice. While at every moment, more and more of their ancestral land is lost to people who believe it is their divine entitlement. Enough of all this. This has to stop, my brothers and sisters. This has got to stop. There can be no equivalence, no comparisons. There is no comparison between the modern weaponry of a sophisticated 21st century military backed by the US and the West and the homemade weapons of an impoverished and desperate population under siege. There is no comparison between a country protected by a missile defense system, the state of the art, and an area like Gaza, besieged and isolated, defenseless against attacks from air, land, and sea. None of these comparisons hold. This cannot be described as war, as so many in the international media shamefully do. War implies some kind of equality of status, of symmetry, some kind of balance of powers. There is nothing like that here. There is only one military and only one recognized state, that is the occupying state. There is only one side, and it is a side that acts as it pleases, when it pleases, with free hands. There can be no justification for using the full force of discriminatory laws to favor one set of people over another, simply on ethno-religious grounds. Jews can make legal claims to properties, as they have in the Sheikh Jarrah, claiming, they say, that this was Jewish owned before creation of the State of Israel in 1948. But Palestinians, we can't. When we actually owned the entire land of historic Palestine, when we lost the majority of our property inside what has become Israel. What kind of law is this? How is such a blatant racism even still in existence? Every day, my friends, brothers and sisters, every day, houses are being razed, villages demolished, people made homeless. Every day, Palestinians are killed, maimed, or detained, often in administrative detention without trial and confronted with so-called secret evidence, as the case in Sheikh Jarrah, in front of a military court, the Israeli military courts, with, can you believe it, a 99% conviction rate. Every day, my brothers and sisters, Palestinians, men, women, and children are humiliated at checkpoints, forced to wait hours, stripped, demeaned, and treated like less than human. Every day, my friends, a child cries for her father, like in Gaza last night, a brother for his sister, a mother for her children. It is sickening. But what is worse is that everyone knows this. Everyone knows this. There is not a politician in the Western Hemisphere who does not understand the true nature of the situation on the ground. Not one, by the way. And I have served in many diplomatic places. I have served in Washington. I'm serving now in London. There is not one politician who does not understand the situation as it is. And yet, lip service is all we get. People talk about respect for international law. Politicians talk about their support for a two-state solution. People talk about their respect for human rights. They talk too much, my friends, and they do little. Politicians talk too much and they do little. Enough of that too. There are things to be done. There are simple actions that governments around the world can and must take if they want to make an immediate, positive, and lasting impact on the situation. The first of these is to agree on a principle, on a major principle. Israel must be held to account for its actions just like everyone else. This culture of impunity must end. Israel must stop being above the law. It cannot any longer be that Israel escapes without consequences for its constant, repeated, and outrageous violations of international law, international humanitarian law, and simple common morality. To this end, my friends, we call on countries, including the United Kingdom, and particularly the UK, given its historic responsibility of creating the agony, the ongoing agony we are still in right now, to do three things. First, to ban all the illegal settlement products, all of these illegal settlement products and settlers from entering the UK, and all the companies that illegally work in these illegal colonies. The UK must support, and the rest of the world must support our efforts in the International Criminal Court to bring Israeli war criminals into justice. And the United Kingdom is late in recognizing the state of Palestine on the 1967 borders. What it is waiting for? Right now, my friends, we are looking at another horror show in Palestine. We fear another massacre like in 2014 and all the wars that preceded it. We see the same parties saying the same things to the same effects as before. We have seen this movie before. We worry. We worry. We worry that the international media has already failed in its duty. For weeks, weeks upon weeks, Palestinians in Jerusalem have been protesting the planned evictions this month of the families from Sheikh Jarrah. But only on Sunday, when the Israeli army invaded Al Aqsa Mosque during the holy month of Ramadan, the prayer, the Laylatul Qadr, did some British media begin to pick upon it. And now it is presented as some kind of Israeli retaliation for rocket fire. No, this is not about rocket fire. This is not about Hamas. This is not about Palestinian reaction. This is about Israel's actions. It is about Israel's crimes and illegal occupation, and it is about the world's inaction and silence. And as I said at the beginning, I say it again here, enough of this impunity. Why do you think Palestinians from Haifa to Rafah, from Jerusalem to Lod, from Ramallah to Hebron, everywhere in Palestine, in Nazareth, in Akka, in Haifa, everywhere, are heroically and defiantly protesting in the streets at a very real risk, as you all know, to their own lives from an unhinged and unrestrained Israeli military and police and forces. It is because, my friends, not only is the Palestinian people united in purpose, we are not just united in purpose, We are also, as a nation, united in suffering. Some of us suffer oppression from military occupation, like our people in the West Bank and Gaza and East Jerusalem, but all of us suffer oppression from legal discrimination by an occupying state. And enough of that. Our struggle is a struggle for justice. You have to see it as a struggle for justice. It is a struggle for justice. And if we see it as a struggle for justice, how come some governments, some Western governments, call on us to stop? It is not the struggle, my brothers and sisters. It is not the struggle, my friends, that should stop. It is the injustice that must stop. Enough of this double standard and in action. And I just want to end by telling you this. Our people are determined, absolutely determined, to end the injustice. And we should, all of us, the rest of the world, stand by them at this critical juncture. Thank you very much.
Brother Hussam, thank you so much for sharing that. Just before you leave us, I have some questions that have come up in the Q&A. And one question here from Brother Naveed is that anti-Semitism accusations have been used to discredit and distract from the criticism of Israel. How do we address this issue?
Well, we must fight anti-Semitism. The heart of the Palestinian cause and the Palestinian issue is the fight against Israeli racism. So no one understands racism more than the Palestinians. And we are absolutely in the front line of fighting anti-Semitism. We do not want to see anybody who only criticizes Jews because they are Jews. But it is incumbent upon all of us. It is a moral obligation, an international obligation, a human obligation, not only to criticize Israeli policies, but actually to act to stop them immediately, to reverse the situation. And therefore, anybody, anyone, any entity, any group who deliberately attempt to conflate between the two fights is harming the two struggles.
Exactly here for that, Brother Hussam. I'm going to pass over now to Nasha MP. Naz, over to you.
Assalamu alaikum, Shabim, and it's an honor to follow Brother Hussam. Hussam has been, I've seen Hussam working tirelessly over the last, not just for these last few days, but since he joined as the Palestinian ambassador to the United Kingdom, to Great Britain. And I'd just like to thank him for his work. And I know we're going to be listening to Jeremy next. I'm not going to stay long, simply because I am en route traveling between London and my constituency. I just want to say this. This is what there's not a lot else I can add on to what Hussam has actually said. I was on the 26th night of Ramadan 2 years ago. I was at the Dome of a Rock, and I had the privilege of being there, and just imagining it's so close to home. Just imagining, watching those scenes unfold. And Layla Moran said in the chamber earlier on that was a terrorist attack. There are the British government. My questions are simply this: is why is it that now, when we have, it's like Osama said, this has been ongoing for time and time again. This didn't happen today. This isn't an incident that has just occurred now. The incidents that are occurring now, and I condemn the violence, and the violence must stop on both sides. However, the truth is, this didn't happen in isolation. It didn't happen today. It didn't happen with just the storming of Al Aqsa. This has been oppression for years and years and years. This has been illegal oppression, illegal settlements, illegal occupation. And the Human Rights Watch report last month set out the evidence base suggesting and calling it apartheid. And more recently, on the 7th, as in this last week, the United Nations put out a press release suggesting that Israel could be guilty of war crimes. What we need to do as people, so I will use my platform as much as possible to hold the government to account and to put pressure, but it has to be from people. And my inbox, has been absolutely full with literally thousands of emails in the last 48 plus hours. But you've got to keep that pressure on. You've got to keep making sure that it's with that pressure that we will bring change, because it cannot be that Israel continues to behave as it is doing, in breach of international laws, but also the humanitarian crisis and the way the Palestinians have been treated and what is happening on the ground. And children, it's like children are dying on the Palestinian side. There was a report which Leila referred to today about a child dying on the Israeli side. We owe it to the Palestinians, we owe it to every child that there has to be peace. And with everything that is happening with the illegal settlements and the annexation of the West Bank and what's happening in Gaza, that seems to be something that is falling and slipping away into the distance. And I'm going to leave it there for people to listen to Jeremy when he joins us. It really is a shame that the camera function isn't working because I'd have really liked to have seen Jeremy and Hussam speaking. And I missed Ismail Bai's presentation and the other ones from live from Palestine. But my thoughts and prayers are with the people of Palestine. I will continue to do all I can. And please use your MP emails, lobby your MPs, your local representatives, because there is another thing as well. Because if you look at Richard Burden's tweet, and he did lots of work, but he was an MP up until 2019, and he chaired the Labour Friends of Palestine, and he talked about a new bill that's potentially also coming through Parliament, which is whilst we're dealing with this issue right now, they want to bring in a bill. They want to bring in something, the government want to bring in something which would stop councils making ethical decisions on those illegal produce that is brought in from illegal occupied territories, and it comes into the UK and is consumed. And the government is trying to do some work and it stopped last time when it tried to do it a few years ago, but it's trying to bring that legislation back. So it can't be just when violence occurs and it's such a volatile situation that we are engaged in this subject. We need to continuously press for change. We need to continuously press for the freedoms and the rightful freedoms of the people of Palestine. And it is absolutely right. We have to call upon this government to recognize Palestine, give it the recognition it absolutely deserves, because the two-state solution as it is slipping away right before our eyes, and it cannot be. Thank you, Shadin, for arranging this. Once again, thank you for all of you who are attending this meeting this evening, this discussion. Keep your Friends of Al Aqsa, whether it's the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign, and those of you who are attending vigils, du'as, please do stay safe, and may Allah be with the Palestinians, and may we see the end to the violence, inshallah.
Naz, whilst we've still got you, I'm conscious that you're traveling and you've stopped to take this call, but there is a question. Yeah, there is a question here, Naz, for you, which is, will the MPs and the British government speak or take steps to remove Israeli oppression when they are the ones who created Israel? So I guess the question is, or the point is, that the British government historically was actively involved in the creation of the State of Israel, and will there be steps taken by the British government?
Well, this is what Hussam was just referring to then, and I'm happy to reiterate it. The truth is that Britain has a moral obligation, because it has created this, it played a part in creating the situation as it is. Now, if Israel doesn't abide, if Israel doesn't do what it's supposed to do and continues to, there's a few things that the government need to answer. One is whether it will vote against, veto against the what's tabled before the United Nations, because so far Britain doesn't take a position, and it needs to, show its backbone and say, well, actually, we're going to stand against the human rights violations. And the second one is, if it's not behaving like a country which adheres to international laws, then will we consider sanctions? And that is what I've said in my video message that went out earlier. I didn't get called in the chamber because only, it's a ballot, and I wasn't successful in that ballot. I know others were, and those questions have been raised. And I would also suggest to people, if you can, go to Parliament TV or BBC iPlayer on Parliament TV from this morning at 11:30, and from 11:30 till 12:30, just before Prime Minister's questions, was the actual urgent question which was raised in Parliament today. Does it go far enough? The government's response go far enough? I'd argue it needs to go further. I've got no doubt it needs to go further, but we know the MPs alone cannot instigate, can't make those changes. But what we have to do is ask the government to make those changes and continue to lobby the government to make those changes, and that's what's really, really important.
I'm going to open this next question up to the audience, to the members here of the panel, because this is a really important question that comes up time and time again in discussions, and that is, what has been the role of the Muslim state? So the question here is, why are the Arab countries not responding or condemning the attacks to Palestine? And that question is open to any of the audience members here who would like to tackle that question.
Well, I certainly, in the last debate that we had, Shad, if I can just answer it briefly from my point of view, in the last debate that we had, Israel is putting this rhetoric out. There is a norm. We've normalized relationships. You can't normalize relationships without the people that the relationship is about, without them being at the table. You can't make decisions about a people without them being engaged in those discussions. So this idea that they've normalized relationships with X country and Y country, it is not. It's a false understanding, and they can use that language all they want, but it doesn't take away the difference that it doesn't make on the ground. You can't. There's nothing without me, and that applies to the people, the Palestinian people. And that's where we also need to we need to continue to highlight this. And this can be seen in Hansard in the debate that we last had on the annexation of Palestine, and I spoke in it at the time. So again, I would say, it is a crying shame. The silence is deafening. It's absolutely deafening that there are countries that are not speaking up, and the world remains silent, and it has failed the Palestinians. And I'm going to say less about that, because I think the real expert on that are the people on the call, and certainly Jeremy when he starts speaking, and I think Osama's left. But yeah, I think that would be the questions to ask. And Jeremy's had much experience on this issue in the house, and he'll be able to elaborate on that.
Yeah, exactly, Naz, and that's always a tough question, and the reality is that there's still a lot of work to be done there. So we've got Sheikh Abdul Haq here, who's based in Bradford, and mashallah, Sheikh Abdul Haq and his team are organising the dua this coming weekend as well. Sheikh Abdul Haq, it'd be really good to hear from you as to, what role you feel the Muslim community should be playing. There's been many different suggestions about what the Friends of Al Aqsa have been doing. There's been excellent work going on in terms of raising awareness in the media. Naz has spoken about her inbox being filled in with all the letters that she's received, and many of the other MPs will have received letters, expressing their concerns and asking them to raise this. But in a wider context, as the British Muslim community, we account for 3 million people here, 3 million plus. What role can we play? What action should we be taking?
Assalamu alaikum to those people who are listening. Good afternoon. And this is Abdul Haq Bewley speaking. The truth is, of course, that all power in the universe, all power in existence belongs to Allah, the Lord of the worlds. And what the Muslim community can do and must do is call on the Lord of the worlds, call on the source of power to help the oppressed, and particularly at this moment to help the people of Palestine in their state of complete dependence on him, and their because they have no help. It's quite clear from what Hussam said and what other people, there is no help coming from outside to them. So what the Muslim community here can do and elsewhere is call on the source of help, to call on Allah, the Lord of existence, as the source of help for those people who are those people who worship Him, who are in difficulty and in need. We in Bradford are going to organize on Saturday a mass recitation of something called the Nasiri Dua. And the Nasiri Dua was a supplication first written by Sheikh Abu Nasr of Morocco at the time in the 16th century, when the Portuguese were attacking the coast of Morocco, and the Moroccans were finding themselves unable to defend themselves. And he wrote this extraordinary long supplication calling on Allah to help the Muslims in their time of need. And this supplication, the Dua Nasri, has been used over the centuries to great effect by many Muslims when they find themselves in this situation. And there is no doubt that if in this country strong groups of people get together and recite this supplication, then the help of Allah Ta'ala will inshallah be felt by the people of Palestine through that action. As I say, this supplication has been used throughout the centuries. It was very influential, for instance, at the time when the French were in Morocco. The Moroccans used to gather in the mosques and recite it, and in the end, the French banned its recitation because of the strength it was giving to the community. And so I recommend that the Muslim community can either use the Dua Nasri or other ways of calling on Allah to help the poor people of Palestine at this moment, and with passion and with intensity, because it's only by the strong intention of those who are doing this that Allah's help will descend. And I ask Allah Ta'ala to help the people of Palestine in this time of need, and to open the way for them, and to resolve this terrible ongoing situation in a way that will be pleasing to Him and pleasing to them.
Exactly, Sheikh Abdul Haq. And just as we're leading on to sort of proactive actions and what is being done on a local level, we know that many of our listeners here are from Bradford, and there's obviously others from around the country as well. But it'd be good to hear from yourself, Maulana Sajid, and Brother Shamsuddin as well, about some of the plans that are taking place in Bradford. In the Q&A section, people are also asking about if there's any further planned events taking place as well.
Yeah, alhamdulillah, first of all, that in all the masajids, I think all the imams have started raising the awareness. We know Qunut Nazla is being recited in the prayers as well. There's been collective du'as, especially during this month of Ramadan. We've been educating the people regarding Masjid Al Aqsa and what Masjid Al Aqsa is, and what steps we can take, proactive steps we can take, lobbying our MP, complaining to the BBC. So all these things have been mentioned. I think one thing, I initially recited the ayats of Subhanalladhi Asra bi Abdihi, that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took His servant on night journey, meaning our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, from Masjid al-Haram in Makkah to Masjid Al Aqsa in Jerusalem, Allah ta'ala wanted to highlight to everybody that how important Masjid Al Aqsa is. Masjid Al Aqsa has number 1, 2, and 3. It is the first Qibla of the Muslims. It was the second masjid to be built, and it's the third holiest site in Islam. It is the only masjid, along with Masjid Haram, to be mentioned in the Holy Quran by name, and it's the only masjid where all the prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prayed at one time behind our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when you visit Masjid Al Aqsa today, whatever you pray your salah, you can guarantee yourself a Prophet of Allah prayed his salah here. So no other masjid has this distinction. One of the things that I urge, and I remember the hadith come to mind, that Maimuna bint Sa'd radiyallahu anha, she asked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that tell us about Masjid Al Aqsa, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam first instructions he gave her was that go and pray in it. And so when she said, what if we can't do that? So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, send oil for its lamps, meaning assist Masjid Al Aqsa. So I think the first and foremost, here in England, we are privileged that, especially, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed us with many blessings. We have the opportunity, we have the wealth, we have the freedom to travel. Okay, not during this lockdown season, but after this, that we can travel to Masjid Al Aqsa and we can go and pray there. And that's very, very important that we go to Masjid Al Aqsa. I think all the Muslims should make an intention. And I think every month there should be groups, once things ease after this lockdown, that we should have groups going every month from the UK to Masjid Al Aqsa to pray in Masjid Al Aqsa. First and foremost, when we start to pray in Masjid Al Aqsa, we will connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We'll understand what's happening in Masjid Al Aqsa and in Palestine. And then we'll understand the historical significance of Masjid Al Aqsa. And also to the Palestinians out there, when they see us, and I remember many years ago that when we put on our ihram from Masjid Al Aqsa and we were walking through the streets of Jerusalem, all the Palestinians came hugging us and kissing us and saying, you're so lucky that you can go to Masjid Al-Haram in Mecca. And so, you feel blessed that, wow, subhanallah, look how much they value you, and look at, how much they love you. So what we need to do, we need to stand in solidarity with the Palestinians. We should go and visit them. We should go and see them. We should meet them. We should support them, and we should pray in Masjid Al Aqsa. And I think that's the main thing is, inshallah, as soon as hopefully lockdown ends, we should all start making intention that we should go and pray in Masjid Al Aqsa. The more we pray, it will send a strong message, to the terrorist Israelis that Muslims have not forgotten about Masjid Al Aqsa, and we will never forget regarding Masjid Al Aqsa. Masjid Al Aqsa is in our heart. And the worst thing is that, it's unimaginable to think that this is happening. God forbid, but if anybody attacks a church or a synagogue or a temple, how angry we would become that, you don't attack a place of religion. It's unheard of. But unfortunately, it's the third holiest site in Islam, and nobody even cares, nobody even talks. And you mentioned about Muslim countries. I think that's where the anger also lies. We know about the Western countries, but the Muslim countries, where's your voice gone? How come you're not angry? Can you not do anything? And so I think the Muslim population throughout the world have lost hope in the Muslim leaders. And so I think, but we shouldn't lose hope that because we've got Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and inshallah, as the common people getting together, we can make a difference. And inshallah, if we stay united, if we stay together, pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, take the proactive steps that we have been told to. We should boycott, we should lobby our MPs, we should make dua, supplication, we should visit Masjid Al Aqsa. Inshallah, Masjid Al Aqsa will be free one day, inshallah. And I think, these are things that we can do.
Jazakallah khair, Maulana Sajid. Really appreciate your thoughts and du'as there as well. Ismail Bhai, going to come back to yourself just to give us a summary, because I think the most important thing here is people want to know, proactively, what can we do? What are those points of action? So, there's a number of things that we've spoken about previously, but, can we just break each one down? And I think, a really important one that we've discussed is, helping fundraise and support the work of Friends of Al Aqsa and other organizations. So Bismillah, over to yourself, Ismail Bhai.
Jazakallah khair. First, let me apologize that I had to go and attend another event. So I'm sorry I couldn't be with you throughout. But I can imagine the very common concerns throughout, as I've been speaking up and down the country, or with people up and down the country, rather, through Zoom nowadays. And it revolves around several factors. First is this hope that there is some knight in white armor called the Muslim army is going to emerge from somewhere and solve our problem for us. Well, what I say to that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of Qiyamah, unfortunately, will not ask us what did the Muslim countries or the Muslim leaders did in 2021 when Masjid Al Aqsa was being attacked or when Gaza was being attacked. If he was ever to ask us, he will ask us, what did you do? Only we as individuals have a responsibility for what we do, not other people. And here lies our solution, not our problem, our solution. Because if we as individuals do stuff, what we are capable of doing, nothing beyond what we're capable of doing within our remit and possibility. And summa alhamdulillah, summa alhamdulillah, and inshallah, that will create a united force and that will bring about a change. Don't believe that victory only comes through military battles. Victory, the long-term victory in Islam and in history have always come through civil society's movement and changing society. Just think about South Africa. No army invaded South Africa to end apartheid. The world society changed and South African apartheid regime could no longer exist. We, the people, made it collapse. In fact, those who are old enough like me and who campaigned for the collapse of apartheid South Africa, Margaret Thatcher used to call Nelson Mandela terrorist. And then when the time came, she had to roll out a red carpet for him. And we made that change, not the leadership. Up until the 11th hour, United States of America and Britain did not help end apartheid South Africa. I'm talking about the regimes, the governments, but the people made that happen. We can make that change in Palestine. So let's not think about a concept, an idea, and be despondent. This is not the time to be despondent. Allah has given us so many assets and capabilities and facets that we can employ to change about this. And you might think things are insignificant and little, but they're not. Boycott, divestment, and sanction is so important now that we should check the label of every product we buy. If it is from Israel, don't buy it. And you might say, what does 10 pounds, 1 pound, 5 pounds do in me not buying Israel? What change would that make? Well, it will make several changes. First, it will make you a better human being, that you're investing your money and spending it ethically. Secondly, it will teach those around you, your own family, to become ethical. Thirdly, imagine a bullet, a stun grenade, only cost 10 pounds. If your 10 pounds that you buy Israeli product with was used to buy that bullet or that grenade, think about it. That 10 pounds is so important when you don't spend it for Israeli product, that Israel at the moment is spending millions of pounds around the world to make sure that people do not do boycott, divestment, and sanction of Israel because it hurts them. And economically, one way we can change, and imagine millions of people in Britain, millions of Muslims and non-Muslims are even more active than us in boycott, divestment, and sanction. Together, we can bring about a change if we all act every day, whether it's in the news or not in the news. The issue of Palestine, we make sure that we do not buy Israeli products, something very strong. I think the other thing is our politicians will not change because it is in their vested interest to support Israel colonial's apartheid state. We have to make them change. Irrespective of the fact, historically, they have supported Israel. They support Israel even now. Our government supports Israel even now, unquestionably. But we need to change that dynamics. Don't think that the next leadership will not change, or we will not be in a position to change who becomes the next leader of either the Labour Party or the Conservative Party or the government. We will slowly be able to change that, but we have to unite. Every demonstration that I have been to, almost every, apart from the last two or three, have been the majority of people who participate with us are non-Muslims. Of course, we live in a majority non-Muslim country, so we expect that. But what I'm trying to indicate here is we have many friends out there, many friends, millions of friends, literally millions, and it is not an exaggeration, who are willing to be with us, to walk with us, to boycott Israel with us, to champion the cause of Palestinians. Let's use them and create a mass movement in this country that can bring about a change. And it will also be a great way of giving dawah to these people. Amazing way through the issue of Palestine and Masjid Al Aqsa is a great barakah in there. So this is a second aspect. So let's lobby our politicians. The first one I talk about, the boycott, divestment, and section. Second is let's lobby. Again, don't, you know, as I mentioned to you, I have been working on this for over 25 years now. I have never in the history of Palestine, even during Operation Cast Lead and all the other attacks that took place on Gaza and on West Bank and Masjid Al Aqsa, we have never had MPs write to us giving us their statement. This is the first time that's happened. It is because individuals like you on this Zoom chat today who have been listening and responding and complaining to their MPs. We are having them now write to us to say, you know, we have received over 1,000 emails. Please, this is our condemnation of Israel. We need more of them. We need the majority of MPs to do it, and we can bring about that change.
If I could just interrupt you there, I do apologize. We've got Jeremy Corbyn has joined the call.
Okay, I'll be very, very brief because you've got other speakers and I'm supposed to be at another meeting already, actually. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me. I heard Naz's contribution and absolutely support and agree with it. I was at the demonstration last night outside Downing Street and there were thousands of people there. Thousands of people there brought there because they were shocked at what was happening at Sheikh Jarrah, shocked at the bombing that's going on in Gaza, and shocked at the way in which the rest of the world has been, as some of your earlier speakers said, relatively silent on this. Now, I've been to Sheikh Jarrah some years ago, and it is a Palestinian area of Jerusalem. It's been lived in by Palestinian people since the 1950s. And it is one that is earmarked to be yet another settlement. It's not the first, and sadly, I don't think it'll be the last, and there's a lot of other settlements. When I visited it, there was what you could call a sort of twin-terraced house. Half of the house had been taken over by settlers, and they were harassing unbelievably the family living in the other half of the house. They were literally moving into the house of a Palestinian family. And I started an argument with the settlers and saying they should treat this elderly Palestinian lady with respect, and that she was old enough to be their mother, and would they dream of treating their mother in that way? And I just got this monosyllabic answer saying, it's ours, we'll have it if we want it. And it was that level of discussion and debate, and there were people demonstrating in support of the Palestinian family. And that was a long time ago, 10 years ago. And this has still gone on, this determination of the people of Sheikh Jarrah to be able to stay there. And there are other settlements, Silwan, determined to become the city of David, and you look out over the Mount of Olives, you look down towards Jericho, and what do you see? But settlement after settlement, and the road through the Jordan Valley up to Jericho, you're passing settlements all the way. And so, if nothing else, during the crisis over Sheikh Jarrah, I hope the rest of the world wakes up and recognizes that what we call Palestine, i.e. the West Bank, has now got over 500,000 settlers living in it. There are roads that Palestinians cannot use. There are checkpoints everywhere, and it's impossible for Palestinian people to lead a normal life. There's a very simple film called The Present, which just describes what life is like for a Palestinian family, where one member of the family goes out to buy a present for somebody else in the family. And you can imagine the rest of the story, checkpoints, searches, etc., etc. And so our determination has to be to stand with the people of Sheikh Jarrah and to protect their right to worship at the Al Aqsa Mosque, and the scenes outside the mosque with the Israeli armed forces attacking people trying to pray, going right up to the borders, if not inside the mosque itself. I'm not sure how far they actually went, but those scenes are unbelievable and terrible in any shape or form. Likewise, the encirclement of Gaza, the siege of Gaza that's gone on for a very long time. A lot of people who haven't been to Gaza find it difficult to comprehend what it's like. It's a very small, enclave. It has the most educated, articulate population in the world. I think 2/3 of the population have university degrees, but 70% are unemployed. And it relies on aid through UNRWA, and it relies on whatever else can be got. Fish can't be caught from but a few miles out to sea, and industry is very difficult, and agriculture is very difficult. It's hard to sell anything. The sense of anger and frustration in Gaza is huge. And the bombing that's now taken place in retaliation to the rockets. Now, let's be clear about this. I'm not in favor of anybody bombing anywhere, anybody firing rockets in anywhere. But the only way you're going to bring about peace in the whole region is by, one, absolutely recognizing the state of Palestine, two, ending the occupation, three, removing all the settlements, four, ending the siege of Gaza, and five, don't forget the needs of the many thousands of Palestinian refugees that are in camps in Jordan, in Lebanon, and the diaspora that is all over the world. So if nothing else, the deaths and the horror and the lack of medical attention and the lack of coronavirus vaccinations and the inability of people with very serious medical conditions to get treatment because they can't get past the roadblocks has at last come to the attention of the whole world through so much of our media. So it's a question of absolute solidarity with the Palestinian people. And that is what I went to the demonstration yesterday to express, and that is what I put in my, my speech to Parliament yesterday. Over the last year or so, I've been involved in a number of meetings and conferences on the situation in Palestine. I know Mustafa Barghouti very well. I thought he spoke absolutely brilliantly on BBC Radio 4 yesterday. I know him very well. I've been to his home and I've been to his office and so on when I've been on the West Bank. And at many of the conferences, I've also been interacting with people from human rights groups, from women's organizations and other groups in Israel who recognize that their own society is curtailed and militarized because of the occupation of Palestine. There are, I'm not saying there's a majority, I don't think there's anywhere near a majority, but there are substantial numbers of Israeli people that recognize that the current situation cannot be sustained. And so our solidarity has to be with the Palestinian people. As I say, that's why I was at the demonstration yesterday. That's why I'm on your meeting tonight. And I'll be at, no doubt, many, many more about this. This is the time to speak up for the Palestinian people and ensure that we, the UK, gives full, unequivocal recognition to the state of Palestine, as I was determined to do in the manifesto that I put forward to the British people in December 2019. I don't retreat from that position. I want that position to be held and it to be carried out. Solidarity with the Palestinian people. They've suffered too much. There's been too many people arrested, too many children put in prison, too many people whose civil liberties have been curtailed because of this, and too much of their democracy has been curtailed because of this. Even the elections can't be held. So absolute support and solidarity, and thank you so much for organizing this meeting this evening in Bradford, and my pleasure to be on it, and my pleasure to meet you all in Bradford just as soon as we can, when we can have open air, outdoor, indoor, whatever kind of other meetings we need. But we don't need to be silent. Now is the time to raise your voice for the people of Palestine.
Wonderful, a powerful message there, Jeremy. We really appreciate you joining us, and we know you're in high demand, and you've been obviously making an effort, and I think that's a wonderful point to bring
that's the climate crisis, but
a close, that hopefully as things improve, we will have the opportunity to meet and proactively hold events in public, and we very much welcome you to Bradford as well, Jeremy. I'm just going to pass back over to
Ismail. It would be my, sorry to interrupt, my absolute pleasure to be there. I've never forgotten that wonderful rally we held on a cricket field in Bradford. It was great.
Yes, let's hope we can do that again soon, Jeremy.
Thank you
so much. Ismail Bhai, we have got 230 people on the call still. We've managed to maintain over 200 people throughout. So alhamdulillah, there's a great deal of interest. There is 80 questions in the Q&A session, which I've tried to pick up on the important ones, but I will share them with you after, and hopefully we can update people via email. But it would be good to have some closing comments and a dua to close this session this evening, inshallah. Ismail, bye, over to you.
Most of the stuff has been mentioned, Brother Shadim, and I think most of the listeners, the fact that they've been with us, understand what now their role and responsibilities. Just to summarize, just visit our website. In summary, please follow us on social media and do whatever you can. And together, inshallah, with the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, will bring about a change. And in the last hours of our Ramadan, make du'as and raise your hands to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and back that up with actions as well. So Jazakallah.
Jazakallah khair, Ismail bhai. And Jazakallah khair to all of our speakers this evening. Jeremy Corbyn, Nasha, of course, Brother Hussam, someone who had to leave early, Sister Abeer Zayyad, Jazakallah khair, and you know, a lot of praise for the great work that you're doing. And Ismail bhai, mashallah, Friends of Al Aqsa are doing amazing work, and you've probably seen the support that you have from the country, inshallah. So long may that continue. And we do apologize that Sheikh Umar Al-Qasani wasn't able to make it this evening. Apologies to all of our listeners that the video content was not able to be live. But Jazakallah khair for sticking with us throughout. Please keep everybody in your du'as, and hopefully, inshallah, we'll have an opportunity again in the near future to hold another event for you. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.